Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Shweta and I welcome you to Teaching Learning with Shweta. Today I'm going to talk about the 15 mental health guidelines that have been given by the Supreme Court of India to all educational institutions, and this has been done in order to ensure that mental health is taken seriously in all the schools and colleges, and particularly in those coaching institutes where rigorous training for competitive exams take place and students are under tremendous pressure to qualify these exams. And a lot of cases of suicides and depression and many other serious mental problems have been reported over the past few years, because of which Supreme Court had to take this very seriously and give out these guidelines that have to be mandatorily followed by all education institutions. So I made this presentation, although these guidelines are detailed and are in depth, but I've tried to briefly show it to you in all my slides. So let's begin with that. The first guideline says that all educational institutes have to frame policies regarding mental health, and these policies of the educational institutions, school, colleges, and even the coaching institutes, they have to make these guidelines available on their websites and also display them on notice boards. So if you walk into an educational institution and you do not find any notice board displaying the policy of that particular institution on mental health, then this is a reportable issue. At least a website should display or have a section where detailed policies of that particular institution about mental health should be displayed. Any institution with 100 or more students will compulsorily have at least one counselor, can have more than one counselor, and there has to be a psychologist or social worker with appropriate qualifications and training. अगर एक इंस्टीट्यूशन है जिसमें 100 से ज़्यादा बच्चे हैं, 100 से ज़्यादा स्टूडेंट्स हैं, तो एक काउंसलर, साइकोलॉजिस्ट और सोशल वर्कर का होना बहुत ज़रूरी है. और ऐसे ही नहीं, वो दे शुड बी प्रॉपरली ट्रेंड काउंसलर होने के लिए आपको RCI रजिस्टर्ड होना होता है, एंड इट इज़ कंपल्सरी टू हैव अ मास्टर्स इन साइकोलॉजी, and experience is always preferred. जो institutions ऐसे हैं, the institutions with less than 100 number of students, they should have linkage with mental health professionals outside, working somewhere else in hospitals or in offices or their private clinics, but उनका continuous आना जाना होना चाहिए institute में. तो association होना ज़रूरी है. जो counselor to student ratio है, the Supreme Court of India has specified that it should be appropriate. It should not be the case that there are 3,000 students and just one counselor available to address the problems of all the students. The ratio should be at least 250:1. The next guideline is that all educational institutions, particularly the coaching institutions, should refrain from batch segregation, public shaming and allocation of unrealistic targets for students. तो जो हम ये schools में होते देखते हैं कि एक section है, section A for the bright students, section B for not so bright students, and one particular section for remedial students or students who have failed. इस तरह से जो clearly segregate करते हैं, divide करते हैं और show करते हैं, display करते हैं, this is a kind of shaming, and also publicly shaming students for not qualifying exams, and also giving them goals कि आपको ये करना है, ये task करके लाना है, which is only adding to the mental pressure in students and setting unrealistic targets for them. ये the institutions, including coaching institutions, have to refrain from this. ये बिल्कुल मना है. तो अगर आपके बच्चे के स्कूल में ऐसा सेग्रीगेशन हो रहा है, या आप कोई प्रिंसिपल है या टीचर है और आप इस तरह का सेग्रीगेशन देखते हैं, तो आपको बता दूं, दिस इज पनिशेबल. Every school should have written protocols for immediate referrals to mental health services and local hospitals. इसका मतलब ये है कि अगर कोई घटना होती है या अगर कोई observe करते हैं, there's an observation of or there's a case of mental health issue, or if a child needs support, then how that child will be provided immediate help, immediate support or access to mental health services or local hospital, that should be written very clearly in the policy of that particular educational institution. The suicide helpline numbers including telemenace should be displayed clearly in legible prints जो कि पढ़ने में आए in hostels in common areas classrooms, ताकि कोई बच्चा है अगर उसको suicidal feeling आ रही है तो वो reach out कर पाए. Next, all teaching and non-teaching staff to undergo mandatory training. तो teachers को at least 2 बार साल में twice they have to attend quality mandatory training on mental health, psychological first aid. First aid सिर्फ चोट लगने पर नहीं बल्कि अगर कोई ऐसा रिपोर्ट होता है, if any case has been reported about mental health issue, depression, or a teacher observes that a student is under a lot of pressure or is vulnerable or can commit suicide or harm herself or himself, then what immediate psychological first aid should be provided? The teachers should be well equipped with these skills. So for that, it is very important that the teachers attend training now, and this has now become mandatory. All teachers, all teaching and non-teaching staff, they have to undergo mandatory training twice a year, and that training has to be received from certified professionals. Teaching and non-teaching staff should first be sensitized, and they should be trained in how to deal with marginalized students. जो marginalized students जो weaker section के हैं, SC ST हैं, differently abled हैं, economically weaker section से हैं, backward classes से हैं, LGBTQ से हैं, उनके बारे में पता होना चाहिए. So attending training to deal with these students is mandatory for the teachers, and also those students who have a history of self-harm or suicides earlier, or they are vulnerable to these mental health problems, how to deal, how to interact with these, how to motivate, how to counsel these students, that kind of training has to be they have to attend this kind of training session twice a year. It is mandatory to have an internal committee in every educational institution. It is important, it is mandatory that there will be an internal committee so that any complaint of harassment is taken seriously, is attended to, and immediate social and psychological support is provided to that student. And also, care is taken that if somebody has complained against some kind of harassment, for example, if a student complains about harassment from a teacher, तो ये नहीं होना चाहिए that should not be the case. The committee is responsible, is accountable to ensure that that student is not targeted and is not harassed. The whistleblowers are not targeted. So timely action should be taken, and if timely action is not taken, Supreme Court has very clearly mentioned this, that timely action, it is found later that timely action was not taken by the internal committee in that particular education institution, despite the fact that the student or the parents or stakeholders reported the issue, then that will be punished. So that is punishable under the law, and those institutions, the authorities will be punished. Educational institutions are supposed to maintain records of all kinds of activities that the educational institutions they organize for wellness, mental health, prevention of suicides, and motivating students to for taking care of their mental health, and training of teachers, and all those activities. The record of all these activities should be maintained annually and submitted to CBSE, UGC, and AICTE. So this mandates the educational institutions to maintain and provide a description of all the activities that they are organizing in the institutions with the intent of promoting mental wellness amongst students. Examination patterns have to be periodically reviewed, and because एग्जाम्स के टाइम में ही ये देखा गया है कि बहुत ज़्यादा स्ट्रेस होता है, स्टूडेंट्स आर अंडर enormous stress, particularly during this period. So sometimes the examination patterns also cause a lot of stress. For example, continuous exams or 3-4 exams in a day, 2 exams in a day, and all these patterns have to be periodically reviewed so that the students they do not face extreme academic burden. It is very important and it is mandatory for the education institutes to also the coaching institutes because whenever I'm saying educational institutes, it also includes the coaching institutes, like the ones predominantly providing coaching for IIT and such exams. So it is very important for all these educational institutions to organize extracurricular activities in art classes and personality development classes, mindful programs, so that the emphasis not only remains on education, but some kind of channelizing of their energies and thoughts takes place on other activities also. So it's not that these education institutions will only be providing academic training, but they also have to make sure that the students take part in extracurricular activities. They have to keep organizing extracurricular activities, so that the burden is not only on academics. It's mandatory for education institutions to provide career counseling to students and parents both from time to time, because it has been seen in a number of cases that a student does not have aptitude for a particular thing, but the parents and the teachers have been forcing that student to rigorously train herself or himself in that particular subject, and resulting in not so good results and resulting in suicides later. So it's important for the education institutions to have career counselors and career counseling to be taking place regularly, and not only counseling the students but also the parents, in order to help them out in identifying the correct aptitude for their children. The residential based institutions, I mean all those coaching institutes where students migrate from distant places and take up hostels and stay there, and it is very important for those institutions to ensure that the environment is harassment free, and they have to take harassment free and also take proactive steps, the wardens and the owners and the caretakers, to take proactive steps to see that there is no kind of substance abuse or bullying taking or harassment taking place within the premises of those institutions, because in those institutions the students, they stay away from their families and are under a lot of stress and academic burden. Residential based institutions to have tamper proof ceiling, restricted rooftops, balconies, and other high risk areas to prevent impulsive acts of self harm. What are impulsive acts of self harm? We have read a lot about this. We have got a lot of we have heard about a lot of cases of students committing suicides in these residential based coaching institutions, and hence, as you can see in this picture, this has been put up in one of the hostels in Kota to prevent suicides of students by hanging from the fan. So this is particularly to prevent that. So such steps be taken by the owners of those residential based institutions. They are accountable to create environment which is completely safe, and entries to rooftop balconies be restricted, because students, they act impulsively, and a lot of cases of self harm have been reported because of the excessive academic burden that they are made to go through. And also in those areas, in those places, in those coaching institutes where huge students from across the country, they migrate for coaching, and also those institutions and those residential areas and hostels where rates of suicides and mishappenings have been high, their Department of Education, district administration would be monitoring, supervising, and would be accountable for maintaining the mental well-being of students. So time to time it will be conducting inspections. It is mandatory for Department of Education, district administration in those areas to mandatorily conduct inspections and keep monitoring the situation. So these are the 15 guidelines given by Supreme Court of India to prevent the mental health crisis, and to promote mental well-being, ensure that students, particularly in this age group, and not only in the coaching institutions but also in schools in general, and and in colleges in general, they do not face any kind of harassment, and the excessive burden, the excessive pressure of qualifying these exams, which lead to they're acting impulsively and harming themselves and feeling of helplessness, hopelessness, these can be kept into check. So these guidelines are very important for the principals, teachers, and even the parents. So this was the purpose of making this presentation and sharing with the stakeholders. So this link, if you click on this link, it will take you to a page where the page or a PDF named Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakram, and here this PDF lists out state-wise suicide helpline numbers. For example, for Delhi, there are numbers available if a student is feeling suicidal or is feeling hopeless or helpless, and in that case, the student can contact at this number. So state-wise and district-wise, the numbers have been provided. Telemanas and state-wise suicide helpline numbers are available through this link. And there are several others also. A lot of NGOs and their contacts have also been mentioned on this document. So it's a very important document for all students across the country. It's a complete document. It mentions the suicide helpline numbers for all the states of the country, and a description of all the NGOs and all people, all the health workers connected with these NGOs and voluntarily serving in this entire mission. So this was about what Supreme Court has mandated for the teachers, the principals, and even the coaching centers and all the educational institutions catering to the students across the country. Thank you. Have a nice day.